All right, everyone, welcome to probably the last episode of Final Cut Pro Help Live in 2019. It is December 1st, and like always, we like to start off the month with some live content, and we got some fun stuff for you on this one. I asked a bunch of, or got a bunch of questions over on Instagram through at Final Cut Pro Help. Go and follow if you have not been following. And we're just going to go through a couple of the questions that I saw on there for tonight's episode. If you can't hear my voice, I'm not 100% health-wise, so bear with me as we go through this and get through this this episode here. But I did want to get you guys some content because it is always fun working with Final Cut and doing some stuff on here. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about on here. Let's see what we got with the questions. So someone asked on here kind of a complex thing, but they said I needed a video to explain everything that's on the menu bar or in the menu bar. And if you don't know, you have the Final Cut Pro interface here, and you have some toolbars and some other stuff. But in any app on Mac OS, if you go all the way up to the top of the screen, the menu bar is located up here. Now, I have it hidden most of the time, so when I go away from the menu bar, it hides, and when I go back up there, it shows again. So this person asked, I needed a video that explains everything on the menu bar here. Now, that's a really tough thing to do, and it would be a really long video if we went through everything that's on the menu bar. But I did want to give an overview of kind of navigating the menu bar, and one thing that I really use, which is the help menu. Now, the way the menu bar works is all the way on the left side, you have the Apple menu, which you can click on that to shut down your Mac, restart it, do some of the basic things. That's in any app that you go into. And then next to that, we have the Final Cut Pro menu, which I want to point out a couple of things in each of these menus that's useful. And under the Final Cut Pro menu, you have preferences, which is super important because that'll let you customize the way that Final Cut Pro works. You have a command section, which lets you see all the keyboard shortcuts, and you can customize the keyboard as well if you need to on that menu. And then the biggest one, in my opinion, under this menu is this one that says Provide Final Cut Pro Feedback. If you have issues with Final Cut, or you have an idea, something you want Final Cut to do that it doesn't, this is a great place to go because this provides that feedback directly to Apple, and they are the developers of Final Cut Pro. And you might and probably won't get a response on here, but they look at this, they read this information, and this is how they determine what updates they put in there. So definitely use this one. Even if you haven't, just click on it, go see what it does. The next menu over is the File menu. This one gives you some of the core functionality like creating a new library, project, or event. You can create some new groups under there, and you can also open or close your libraries. I've gotten a lot of questions with people who are kind of panicking, and they're like, everything's gone, I don't know where it went. And all that happened is that their library was closed, and all they needed to do was go up to File, Open Library, and if they didn't see their library in the recent lists right here, they just clicked on Other, and they were able to get right to it. If that didn't work, then it might be that their library was corrupted, and they even have an option here to go to a backup. And Final Cut makes some automatic backups of your libraries in case something drastically goes wrong. You can restore from one of these backups. So that's another thing in this file menu that's here. You have some import and exporting options, along with some options to copy the content from one library to another if you have multiple open, and even an option down here to move stuff to the trash, which permanently deletes it. So that's the file menu. Under the edit menu, some things I'll point out under here. Obviously, you have the undo and redo, which is your Command Z shortcut. Get used to that. Do a lot of editing. You might try things out. Doesn't work. Command Z or edit undo, and you're good to go. You also have some options here to select all clips, deselect clips, and then my favorite shortcuts with copying and pasting of effects or pasting of attributes. You can also go here and remove effects and attributes, which are some great ways to clear off a clip after you've made a whole bunch of changes that maybe you didn't want to do anymore. You can also duplicate clips, and there's an option here that says duplicate a project as a snapshot. I recommend when you're duplicating almost always to duplicate it as a snapshot so that the changes you make to things like compound clips and some other nuances from one project don't affect the other. You can look at other videos on this channel for more details on most of these things that I'm showing you here. Also, under the edit menu, you have options to connect all of your media. All the stuff you see here is actually from these same buttons that are on the toolbar. You can just also do them from the edit menu. So if you do have any kind of questions about all these buttons down here, most of them are also up under the menus as well. And then also kind of buried here under the edit menu is all the options for the captions to be able to add and remove captions and customize them, split them, all that kind of stuff there. All right, next menu over is the trim menu, which this usually will be using a tool like the razor blade or even just dragging around on the timeline, but you can go up here to trim things. You can even join a clip back together. If you've split something, you can then go up to trim and do join clips, which is a fun one there. As you can see, there's a lot of things in these menus. So just kind of go up and play with them, try them out. That's the best way to get familiar with what's here. The mark menu allows you to set ranges, add markers, customize markers, and it allows for navigation. So you can use the go to or next, previous to navigate around the timeline. I find going up to this mark menu and then choosing one of these options is really slow. So I do recommend that when you are using these options, that you look at the shortcut listed to the right of whatever option you're choosing. If you're going to the previous frame and you're going up to mark previous frame, it takes a long time. Just use the left arrow on your keyboard, you'll nudge over a frame. So those are the kind of things that if you use anything in these menus frequently, make sure you find out what that shortcut is so that you can use it and go to it. The other part is if you go under a menu, like we'll go into the clip menu here, you'll see there's a couple options here for synchronized clips and open clip. Synchronized clip has the shortcut option Command G over on the right side here, but open clip doesn't have any shortcut listed. If that happens and you're using this option all the time, you can go under the Final Cut Pro menu, go down to commands, customize, and you can add a shortcut to that key. So yeah, if you use anything under these menus all the time, assign it a shortcut. That way you don't have to continue to go up to these menus because it is a little slower. Some other things under the clip menu, you have a bunch of auditioning options, which the audition feature is pretty useful if you want to customize and try things out without losing your current edit. You have the options here to show the video animation, which I've used in many videos previously to this one. You can also disable solo clips. Some other customizations there with the audio. Under the modify menu, you can go here to analyze clips, which we usually see in these lower left kind of corner here of the viewer. You have some options in there to analyze and fix things like balance color, enhancing the audio, but they're also up here under the menu, including the retime options. We then have an option here to apply a custom name, which is kind of a nice feature if you're organizing many clips. You can apply those custom names in here and you can edit them as well. This is also something you can do buried in the inspector, but again, the menus have most of the features that are in the interface just up under a menu so you can get to them there. We then see at the bottom here some options under the role options to render content. So you can definitely go here and render all. If you've turned off background rendering, this is where you go to render something. Under the view menu, you have some options to customize the interface. One of my favorite shortcuts under here is going to be Command 0 to rearrange the interface back to its default. But under this view menu, you can turn things on and off, like skimming and zooming to samples. You can turn all this stuff on or off and customize the way that Final Cut and your keyboard and kind of the way you interact with Final Cut and it interacts with you is customized. And that's the same thing with the window menu as well. Now, all of these things can be kind of tricky, but I will say I haven't come across something that's not up here, but under the help menu, which is my favorite menu, you can go here and find help for just about every feature. So if you're under one of these menus and you see something that doesn't make sense, type in what that thing is under the help menu, and you'll probably get an answer to what it is. Apple is very good at documenting their support and the information that they have online and inside of the Final Cut Pro help. So definitely look into that there. The other thing I'll say about this search, and probably one of my favorite features is, and this is a Mac OS thing, it's not specific to Final Cut, But if you know something's under one of these menus, you just forget where it is, you can start typing it in here. Like we know that copy is under the edit menu, but if I start typing in copy, you'll see that I get an option here that says copy to library, copy, and then copy timecode, keyframes, copy. And as I go through these, you'll see each one of them gets selected, and it shows me and points right to where that is in the menu bar. So really nice feature if you know something is in the menus and you just forget where it was, maybe the render option, for example. I start typing in render, and there I can see render all. Now, I know it's under the modify menu, and I could go up to modify down to render all, but you can even click on it right here. If I click render all, it's going through and trying to render. So that is what I got for you as far as a kind of a tutorial as far as everything that's under the menus in there. Really hard to explain everything that's there, but that's kind of a quick overview of what's there. And if there's a specific feature or a specific option under the menu bar that doesn't make sense to you, or you want a more detailed explanation, don't hesitate to send a direct message to me on Instagram or an email to finalcutprohelp@me.com, and I'd be happy to go into that in more detail in the next video. Cool. So then the next question I had on here that I wanted to answer, the question simply is, how can I make a video intro with many transitions? Now, your intro videos, a lot of times intros and kind of openings to TV shows or even a YouTube channel, if you have a little opening video for it, you can have all kinds of different clips that you're working with, and you might want them to flash on the screen in a certain way. So you can definitely do that in all kinds of different fashions. So let's just take a look here. I'm going to click on one of these clips on the timeline. I'm going to do Command A to select all of them, and I'm going to hit the delete key just so we get an empty project. I'm also going to use the shortcut Command 0 to rearrange the interface back to the default layout. So regardless of how you've rearranged your window and your layout here, just use Command 0 and it'll rearrange it in this kind of default layout here. Now for an intro video, if you want to use a lot of transitions, that's fine. There's no problem with that. I'm just going to drag down a couple still images here of these roses. I'm going to click OK to make a HD project. Same thing with this one. And then I'm going to do Shift Z just to zoom into this timeline so that it's really close. I'm going to go over to my transition browser here, which is the one all the way on the right side of the toolbar. You can also use a shortcut Control Command 5 to bring that up. And if you're working with transitions that are on really short clips, when you drag one in, it may not even fit like this. Like these still images are 4 seconds long. So we could make these much, much shorter clips, and that's fine. You just might have to make your transition shorter. And you can click and drag on it to shorten it or lengthen it however fast or slow you want that transition to be. And these clips then can very quickly cut together. So with many transitions, that's fine. There's no problem in doing that. It's just doing everything on the primary storyline down here might become kind of cluttered. It might be hard to work with. So if that's the case, if you want more space and you want to be able to transition between multiple clips, start to stack your clips. This is going to be my next recommendation. Because we can go up here, we'll just drag another clip here. We got these trees, why not? I'll bring that down. And now I'm stacking it. I'm putting it up here kind of on the second layer on top of the primary storyline. I'm going to hit B to bring up my razor blade, cut this, hit A to switch to the arrow and delete this. And now I can also bring in a transition on this one. Maybe we want to do a clock transition on the beginning of the end, and I'll shorten these. So now if I play this, we're going to see kind of a, let's move this over. We'll see what happens here with this one. So if you notice, it kind of starts to transition, and then we get a clock transition. It's really quick. If I go frame by frame, this is all very, very quick, but we're transitioning out of one clip on the roses to another rose while this clock transition happens on the big rose in the background there. So as you start to stack your clips, this allows you to make and kind of have multiple transitions going at one time. So, that's kind of how you can do it. You just have to put the clips on and then start stacking them and then put whatever transition you want on them from your transition browser there. So that's kind of to do that one. And then the next question that kind of related to this was how to put certain items on one track instead of letting them drop down onto the main timeline. So Final Cut Pro 10 doesn't really have tracks in kind of the standard sense. You have this primary storyline, which is the darker area going through the timeline. And if you want to put stuff down onto your timeline, but you don't want it to go on the primary storyline, that's fine. You just have to connect it to another clip that is already on the timeline. So I'm going to go to this other clip here to just click and drag it down. And notice below the green circle there with the plus in it, there's that little blue line that goes all the way down to the down to that rose clip. That's your clip connection. So it's dragging it down and it's connecting it to that clip there. So that's all you have to do to put something down kind of onto a second track there. But the other part of this is how do you move stuff around so that it's not going on to this primary storyline. There's actually another tool built into Final Cut. We're on the normal select or arrow tool, but there's this one called the position tool. Shortcut to get to is the letter P. You can just hit the P on the keyboard and it'll activate it. But the position tool allows you to move things around on the timeline without really paying attention to the magnetic timeline part. So let me take another clip down here, and notice if I drop this down, it's just putting it wherever we want it to go. And this can be kind of hard to see with it zoomed in. So let me shrink down the height of these clips here. And let me bring down another clip. I'll delete these two. And so I'll delete this out of here as well. So if I click and drag this down with the arrow tool, hit A to go back to the arrow tool. Notice if I drag it over here and let go of it, it pops it down onto the primary storyline and just puts it right there at the end. Which for most people in most editing scenarios, I would say that is the behavior that you want to happen. But maybe you don't want that. And if that's the case, hit the letter P to activate your position tool, and then click and drag this down, and now you can drop it wherever you want. If I drop it up here, it makes it a connected clip to the primary storyline. If I go and bring it in again, but I drop it on the primary storyline, it drops it right where I let go of it and inserts this gap clip. That's what this thing is. It's just a gap, basically an empty clip with nothing in it, and you're good to go. So to answer your question, how do you do that? Well, get used to clip connections, because that's a big part of Final Cut Pro 10. But if you want to kind of ignore clip connections and just put stuff right where you want it, then get the position tool. Just be careful, because if you drag down another clip, say this one of the in and out joint here, and I drop it onto the clip that I already put down there, if I do that, it is actually overriding and erasing what was there already to put this one in there. So just be careful as far as your editing goes with that position tool, because the magnetic timeline is great because it lets you avoid erasing things you didn't mean to. Position tool kind of goes over that part. All right, so those were the first two questions there. The next one that I wanted to answer, because this is kind of a basic editing. As you're learning through it, if you're actually learning the art and the technique, you're going to hear the terms a J and an L cut. You might hear J cut, L cut. We need to do that. So what is a J and L cut? Well, let's look at that. So let me delete everything here. And I imported some clips. Let me go up here and organize it by the date imported. And we should see some clips from today after our spinning circle goes in. And I just have an interview clip, and then I have some B-roll that's going on as well, right? So here's a little interview. I'm just going to grab a random piece of this. I'm going to hit the B key to get my razor blade up and cut out some of this. And so I have this interview shot here. This is actually pretty long. Let's make this a little bit shorter. All right, so here's my interview piece, right? And when you have an interview, it's usually supported by other clips and other content, which I do have some B-roll of some donuts here, because that's what this interview is about, this donut shop. And I'm just going to grab one of these clips and drop it down in front of the interview, and then we'll go down and I'm going to do the same thing at the end. Got another shot of the donuts and put that at the end. All right, pretty straightforward. Now let's play this interview and hear what she's actually saying.
As croissants, which was my first baking project. It's actually called the rich man's bread in the pastry world. As croissants, which was...
So if we watch this, we see the donut. and then it cuts,
as croissants,
and
which
she's
was my
talking,
first
and now
baking
we hear her
project.
talking, right? And so that's a straight cut. And let me zoom back in, make this a little bit larger. Basically, there's just a straight line between one clip and another. So this is where we'd actually want to make and use a J and an L cut, depending on which side of it. So this is going to be a J cut because I actually want to hear the audio from the clip that we're going into, which is her interview. So Final Cut makes this really easy. You just double click on the audio at the bottom here. It expands out, and now we can extend that audio over into the left clip. So notice how there's a little tiny gap. They're not actually separated, but if I click and drag the audio to the left, it lets me extend that audio out. I can even grab the little handle here and have a little fade in of the audio as well. And then I'll double click the audio again to shrink it back down. It's not gone from the beginning, but if I play it, we'll hear that audio fade in before the actual cut happens.
Is pretty much in the same family as croissants,
which is a great way to smooth out an edit point. It lets your viewers, the people that are watching, understand that they're hearing this person's voice and they know that they're going to see this person next. So when you cut to your subject, in this case this woman here, it's not a big shock. It's like you're expecting to see, someone because you heard them talking initially. Watch this whenever you're watching TV, especially like news stories, and they're doing a little segment on something. You're going to hear this all the time. You'll hear someone talking first before you actually see them. And in that case, they've used this J cut. And we'll see the same thing here. We'll do an L cut here at the end. Let me play this. We'll see what it sounds like without any L cut.
So probably one of the more complicated.
The audio just cuts, and then we see this random donut here. So I'm going to double click on the audio. It expands it out, and then I can click and drag this to the right to extend that audio over to the right, and then maybe a little fade out using that handle for the silence there, so it is a smoother fade out. And we'll play it.
So probably one of the more complicated doughs to make.
And it smooths out that transition. Even though it's a physically a cut visually, the audio is smooth and makes your edits much more smoother if you're using those J and L cuts. So that was another question that came through on Instagram there. And we got time for about 2 more here, so let me see what we got here. So we have one in here it's a little confusing, but they were talking about the rate, and I think they were trying to ask about frame rates on videos and kind of just in general a little bit more information on frame rates because they're newer to working with video. So frame rates are a little tricky when you are new to video, but just think about video is just still images, right? You're just putting a bunch of pictures together. On your keyboard, just use the arrow to the right to go to the next frame, and each frame is a new picture that you're seeing. Whatever the shot is, whatever you're looking at, like in this case, they're doing this focus on the donut. So if I use the arrow to the right, each time I go to the right, it's getting a little bit more out of focus as they changed that when they were shooting. You have your time code here in the middle, which you can click on to do stuff and navigate and move around. You can even go up to the window menu, and there's an option to bring up a giant time code window, so you can see your project or source time code, and you'll get a window with that in there. The project time code tends to be a nice one because that's just the same thing that's showing up in the middle. So you can get this window. You can even make this really large if you want to. If you're getting used to working with frames, this window might be helpful so you can see exactly what you're working with. But notice each frame that I go through, it's just arrow to the right. I'm just stepping through it, and that's going each frame that you're going through as you hit the arrow to the right. Now notice here when I get to 22, 23, and then when I should be getting to 24, it switches over to 23. That's 23 seconds and 0 frames, because this was shot at about almost about 24 frames a second, which is usually closer to the look of actual film. If we're thinking older films that were shot on actual physical film, they were usually shot about 24 frames per second. So video now on a lot of cameras simulates that by shooting at roughly 24 frames per second, where you select your clip, you can go up to the inspector to see what frame rate this actually is. And you'll see this under the inspector, under this kind of top bar at the top here. You have the frame size, 1920 by 1080. And then we have our frame rate here, which is 23.98 frames per second. It's P, which is a progressive frame rate. But this is your frame rate, or this is the frame rate of the specific clip that you have selected. Now, your project can be a different frame rate. If we click on the project here, we can see over on the right, it's the same frame rate. It matched up what our clip was. If I click on this other project, this sharing test, that one's the same. Here, this one is a 25p, so it's 25 frames per second. So you have all these different frame rates. And what's nice about Final Cut is you can mix multiple different frame rates of clips together in a single project, but your project itself can only have one frame rate. If we do Command N for new, and we want to make a new project, we'll give it a name. So let's say FCBH, and then I'm going to click on Use Custom Settings. And you'll notice under the video section, there's an option to choose your rate, which is your frame rate. And so these are some of the frame rates for projects that Final Cut supports. Now, Final Cut does support video at higher or different frame rates than what you see here, but these are the projects that are created. This is kind of the output formats that you would use. So just know that once you set your frame rate for your project, it's something you can't change. So you can see when I'm creating a new project here, I can set it to whatever I want. But if I go into the project settings for an existing project and I click on Modify, this one's a new one, so it does let us change it here. Oh, no, it doesn't let us change it because we're set to this. But yeah, you can see here on the frame rate, if we click on it, we're just stuck with that one frame rate. So this is something you want to consider early on in creating your projects, is what frame rate you want to use. And most of this is going to be what are you actually going to export to and share to, or what kind of content are you using. So it's kind of all over the place, but that's some of the things about frame rates inside of Final Cut. The most important thing to know is just that your project only has one frame rate that you're working with, and a lot of times your destination for where you're sharing this is going to determine what frame rate you should be using. And as far as frame rate for what you're shooting at when you're actually capturing your stuff, it's the same thing. This is something you don't want to be thinking of right when you're creating a new project. You want to really have this before you even start shooting your content. If you're shooting live action sports, for example, you'll probably want to be shooting at a higher frame rate. So you can go back and do slow motion, and you'll have all those frames to work with. Whereas if you're doing something like this interview or more of an artsy piece that's like a film, you may want to shoot at something that's closer to 24 frames per second. But if you're in a country that supports the PAL standard, then you'll probably be shooting at 25 frames per second as opposed to a 30 frames per second or something that would be done in the NTSC environment. So a lot of information I know around the frame stuff there, but essentially you want to make sure and understand what you're shooting with, what's the content actually shot at. If you have control of that, you might want to do some research on which option is best for you. But then when you bring that content into Final Cut, you can click on the clips and look in the inspector to see what frame rate those clips are at, and then you can create a project using those settings. When we did Command N, we said use custom settings. If you don't do that and you just use the automatic settings, then that frame rate is going to be based on the first clip that you add to your project. So if you know everything that you're doing in the interview and everything is at that 23.98 frames per second, don't go and add in some random B-roll shot that was shot at 60 frames per second. Otherwise, your project's going to be set to that. All right, so that is some frame rate stuff. Let me see if there's anything else. We're not going to the Final Cut gym today. I thought there was one other question that I really wanted to get to here. Let me scroll through it. Yeah, I guess that was it. The last one that was on here that was a little confusing. It said, why does Final Cut Pro doesn't put a video preview while you want to edit a compound audio clip? Now, I'm not too sure what that actually means as far as the question there, but there's a couple keywords in there that I can definitely talk about, which first is the compound clip, and he said a compound audio clip, but there's no differentiation between a compound video clip and a compound audio clip. You still have the same functionality in there, and if you don't know, if you select a couple clips on the timeline, you can make a compound clip using Option G on the keyboard. You can also go up to the menu bar, but Option G creates a compound clip. So I'm just going to call this compound clip 1. I'm going to add it to the event stock media. And now here's our compound clip. I'll do Shift Z to zoom this to fit. And basically what a compound clip is just grouping multiple clips into one. I can now move and rearrange this clip, and it's moving everything that was in there. If you double click on the compound clip, it opens it up, and we can see what's in that clip. So that's what a compound clip is. As far as compound clips with audio goes, it's really the same thing. You would just have audio clips in there. Now, on this question, you said, why is there no preview? And what you might have been saying is why don't you actually see a picture there? So let's go up and grab some audio. We'll just grab a couple sound effects here. We'll do Shift Z to zoom out. I'm going to select these and then do Option G. And this is going to be our audio compound clip. And then put it down there. So there's no video preview here because it's just audio. There's nothing to see. So that's why you don't have a preview. And this would be the same as a single audio clip, but also for a compound clip, it shows up that way as well. So if we double click on it, we can go into that compound clip and see it. And again, here, when we're in this compound clip, you're only seeing what's inside that compound clip. That's why in the viewer here, it's just black, it's just blank, because you're not going to see those other clips. They're not inside of this compound clip. Just like if we go back to this compound clip, notice if we play it, you kind of hear that background scratchy noise there. But if I double click on this compound clip and go inside of it, it's just her interview sound playing because you're no longer seeing the entire project. You're just seeing what's inside of that compound clip. So now that I've worked through it, I think that might have been the question you were asking is, why don't you see any video with your audio compound clip? It's because there's no video in that clip. So while you're inside a compound clip, you're only going to see, or in this case hear, what clips were actually added to that clip, to that compound clip. So hopefully that makes sense and gives some clarification to compound clips and what was there. We're just at a half hour now, which is perfect. That's the time I want. I see a couple comments in there. Mr. Gigi always coming through. He's fun to work with. Been a long time since I worked with him, but I keep seeing people come through. So always appreciate the thumbs up and the support there. And if you have your own questions, definitely on Instagram at Final Cut Pro Help. You can send a DM on there. You can also send me an email. Either way, I see another comment in there that you appreciate everything you see on Instagram. Yeah, we put up those shortcuts almost every single day. I try to get one out every day on Final Cut. So if you don't know Final Cut that well and you're just looking for random tips, go over to Instagram. That's where I post those. And we're going to hopefully continue to help out your editing workflows and keep those things where they should be. And also, I like to put things up there in a pretty random order because I'm sure you're going to see tips that you didn't even know was a thing that Final Cut could do. So, yeah, Instagram is definitely the place to check all those out on there. So that's what I got for you today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your December in 2019. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment if you find something interesting, or if you have those questions, definitely send those over. Otherwise, I'll see you in 2020.